Hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm Danny, and today we talk with Leslie Ann Van Helm, the Managing Director of Khulisa Social Solutions. If you haven't heard of them yet, their goal is to empower vulnerable children, youth, and those who are marginalized to unlock their full potential and develop resilient pathways to a sustainable future. Before we begin, remember, if you're new here to this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Hi, Leslie, and welcome.
Thank you so very much. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I think I got really amazed about the kind of work that you do, especially because you call yourselves Khulisa Social Solutions, right? The social enterprise. So I think that speaks a lot about your approach on the challenges you face. But let's begin about learning about your genesis. Since you are a founder, right? You're the founder and CEO of Khulisa. This gives us a special edge. So when and how did it all begin?
Well, I spent many years before Khulisa started and during deep apartheid days working with a very famous cultural historian called Credo Mutwa. And during that time, I traveled the world with him, and my obsession was his storytelling. He was a custodian of African mythology. And whenever he started telling stories about Africa and the myths and the legends and the annals, I was just infatuated. So I actually wrote 12 books with him. And when the new government came in, I thought, no, we've got to bring these African stories to our school-going children who before weren't really allowed to learn about their own culture. And the Department of Education agreed on us piloting this, and we got funding from our national telecommunications company. And so we piloted storytelling in schools. We taught teachers how to do storytelling as an educational methodology. And by default, I ended up in a juvenile prison, in the school in the juvenile prison. And there we did a week-long storytelling program with Credo Mutwa. And during that week, part of the storytelling was the offenders telling us their story, because everything is about the story. That's the way we live. And during that week, when I listened to the stories of these young offenders, I realized that we don't ever ask anybody what they did, but what happened to them. And that is what I then embarked on a mission, is to actually find out the causal factors that led to why these young men were actually incarcerated. And when that actually transpired, I then started looking at why young people commit crime. And so they were released. We set up a halfway house. We put them into schools to do storytelling. They the school going children. Then we started working in schools, and then they left school and we started doing out of school programs. And eventually, we developed programs during the entire life cycle, because we were constantly following the needs of the different audiences. So that's how Khulisa started.
That's amazing, and I really love that you talk about stories, right? Because in the end of the day, it's really, as you said, what moves us forward, right? And talking about
Absolutely.
these stories, and considering, because you are now acting in so many communities. I think in your website you say that you're active over 100. I think it's around 150.
250.
Yeah, that's amazing.
250.
That's amazing. So, what are the most pressing issues that you see in these communities? What are the stories that you're here right now?
I'm afraid that the issues are across all communities basically the same. The inequality in our country has led to appalling education levels, has led to crime, gender-based violence, environmental dysfunctionality, and drug addiction. All these things we try to deal with, like drugs and gender-based teenage pregnancy, they're all symptoms of total dysfunctionality. And unfortunately, that pervades most of the communities across our country.
Wow, it's so difficult to hear that, right? I think I'm Brazilian. I often say this here, and sometimes I kind of mirror the challenges. And I know that this reality of inequality, is something really hard to overcome, uh, because it's so like encrusted in our social system. It's really something heavy, I would say, to carry on. In the research I did about you guys, one thing that really popped out, kind of astonished me, was the myriad of services that you have. I think this is kind of related to the possibilities to get out of these challenges that you just mentioned, right? So let's begin talking about them to understand better how they're structured. Which areas do you focus on your work on Khulisa?
So we work in geographic ecosystems. So we look at the entire ecosystem, because you can't look at just working in a school and then children go home and they're raped. So when we start working in the community, we will engage with the NGOs, the community members, and start with a particular issue and say, what would it look like if it was fixed? So that's like a system theory approach. And we then start analyzing all the triggers that bring the risks to the community. So we've got an ecological model. And when we start looking at the ecology of the community, you start saying, okay, we can't tackle everything. We can't, get the sewage fixed up. We can't do the water, but let's look at now, number one being the poor education levels. Most of our children who leave school can't read or write. It's a fact of life. So they just get pushed from one year to the next. And I'll grade our learners. If by the time they go to school, if they can't even read for meaning, they're doomed. They will never get jobs. And so we then start looking at the ecosystem within the school and the ecosystem around the school and the ecosystem, and that's the family and the community. And we start saying, right, what are we going to do to support these children with their education? But not only with that, but with the inactivity and the boredom that they have, because there's no recreational facilities. They've all been destroyed, neglected, which is again another issue. You need to say why. What's the causal factor that things are built and then destroyed, but they're built because they're not co-created with the community. Whoever has invested has just built a clinic or done something without asking the community what they really need. So when the community gets angry, they'll burn it down. So we need to look at, and we've done research with over 15,000 youth around the country, and we've asked them what would your lovely life look like? And there are 7 or 8 key issues that the children have asked for. And it's access to IT, it's being connected, having recreation, having a mentor, having enhanced education. They want IT, they want to learn, they want about career guidance. And 91% of the learners that we interviewed have asked for career guidance. I mean, really, you don't even know what career you can go into because you've never been assessed. You don't know where your skills lie. So we then start bringing in different partners and saying, right, what NGOs are there in this community? What NGOs are doing what? And then we bring the NGOs and we find that they've never been funded. So they're not, although they're doing the work with total passion, they're not properly registered, and they don't really have proper monitoring and evaluation tools, and they don't have proper programs. So we try to get funding for the NGO capacitations. They are the assets in the community. And when we capacitate these NGOs, they then become far more functional. So we've got NGOs then working with arts and crafts, others doing literacy, others doing work in the schools, others doing drugs, GBV, creating arts, parks, and so we've got now a network of partners, and we acting as a catalyst or the driver behind it all, building their capacity to become far more functional. And when we have our NGOs who are being functional and they're getting paid by Khulisa a small stipend, they then start really understanding the needs of their own community members. So we're now dealing with different demographics, and we always use dialogue circles to find out what their particular demographic or target audience needs and what their take on their particular situation is. So we then, from the dialogue circles, we gather the data, we put it into a central data bank, and then we produce data-generated reports to find out how within that ecosystem we can start then addressing the needs of the NGOs and then directly their own client base as such. So that's how we manage to do our work. It's very multifaceted, but it's not us who's doing all the work, it's our NGO partners.
I see, but it's a quite complex thing to do. One, I think it's also always actually vital to have the communities involved. And in this case, I think it's really a huge testament of your commitment to these communities, how you tailor, you seek for information, you gather the data to tailor the programs, to tailor the help that you're able to offer to the NGOs and to the communities. And even though you delegate, as you said, kind of delegate the application of it. It's a huge structure to make this whole thing happen, and this level of commitment. And with that, I kind of need to move to ask you, how are you able to keep this whole structure going? Because with so many areas, with such a deep work, in my perspective, uh, it must require a structure that is quite robust. I mean, is that correct? Is
Well,
this perspective
you have to
correct?
be robust. After 27 years, you're so thick-skinned. Nothing can knock you down. But so we're not able, in all the communities where we work, we're not able to do this whole ecological model because you need quite substantial funding, obviously. But we've taught so in all the communities where we work, we do have projects running that are either funded by the Department of Social Development. And now of late, we've got a partnership with one of South Africa's biggest fiber companies called Herotel, where they've commissioned Khulisa to find schools and or early childhood development centers or libraries where they install free fiber. And that's also enabled Khulisa to at least address this issue of the lack of connectivity. So that's a hugely increased our geographic footprint. And that is where we'll go to an NGO in an area to say, look, find a creche in this where there is fiber already. And you can either have your own office equipped with fiber and unlimited Wi-Fi, or otherwise find your local hospital or somewhere else. So that's really, what's also, been amazing for us to be able to capacitate other NGOs to be able to have access to the Wi-Fi, where, through libraries where at least the children can learn outside of their very, very dysfunctional school environments.
Wow. And I'm thinking here also, because you mentioned again, your guys are working for 27 years, right? So a lot must have changed since you began working. I think a bit, it's kind of still hard to change though. But looking ahead, looking for the future, what are your key goals and aspirations for the years to come?
Well, my real aspiration for the years to come is to have a functional government. The corruption, the everywhere you turn. I mean, we just realize now our own very Department of Social Development that's employs thousands of social workers. They've just had so much corruption unraveled, where NGOs who run beauty training salons have received millions and millions, whereas last year we had to close down all our old age homes, all our foster homes for children. They had to go home, and then 6 weeks later they say, okay, now we've got funding because they were sued. But now this year they're warning us that they've got no money, but it's because of the corruption. So that is the biggest and the most depressing thing of all, is not having a government that can really work with you and hold your hands. And I'm saying that's at the moment. And there's deep depression amongst most South Africans around the way the government functions. So it's not because of, it's in spite of the government. But our aspirations for the future are to form partnerships at a local level. And most importantly, is because we've got so much evidence of what is really needed, is to be able to go to the corporate market and to international investors and say, please don't assume that HIV/AIDS is the most important thing. Let's look at what's causing it. Let's go at grassroots level. Let's invert the pyramid, and let's get the data, or we've got the data already. Let's join forces. Let's break down the silos, because there's, corporates work in silos, government departments work in silos, NGOs work in silos. But if we broke those barriers down, we'd be able to leverage so much impact and have such great return on investment. And that's my biggest aspiration, is use the data. Let's find where we all fit into the map, and then let's start having an avalanche of support and knowledge being brought into the communities so that we actually see systemic growth.
Wow, I thank you for sharing this perspective. I think it's something that I myself need to get a lot more educated, because I would say that we had overcome this idea of not the only, but the main help that African countries need is fighting HIV. I think this was kind of something that we have overcome over the past years, but apparently not, which is a shame. And I think it's necessary to see other perspectives, right? So thank you for bringing this. Would you mind if we talk about this a little bit more? Because
No,
you mentioned this need of your communities of especially youth, talking about career, right? Career paths. What are like, let me rephrase that better. What are the requests, right? The demands that you're seeing more closely right now, and how these organizations, big companies, international companies could actually help out organizations such as Khulisa right now.
Well, so the real, I mean, there's unemployed. There's many of our adults have never finished school, and a lot of our brains have gone left our country, and our youth. Many of our youth cannot read or write properly. So what we're going to look is at assessing them and find out where their aptitude lies. And we're finding a lot of them have got potential for artisan skills. So there are courses that we can offer for them to go into artisan building, working on different trades, and then entrepreneurship, and definitely into micro agriculture. We have so much land and we've got such successful projects. We've even started vegetable growing in people's backyards. We've got veggie like libraries where people bring their vegetables together and sell the vegetables in the community. So sustainable livelihoods is a very, very important part of our country as well, in teaching people the value of healthy living, and also how people can live a very meager or earn a very meager income, but at least generate income from their own backyards and from setting up community gardens where we can start selling the produce. And there's a very big appetite for that at the moment, because we've got beautiful land and an abundance of it.
Thank you for this. Again, I do hope our listeners also are getting a gist of the new situations, right? How we can help in different perspectives now. Before I move to my final question to you, Leslie, I just want to share with everyone listening or watching us right now your webpage, because we covered a bit of the work that you do, but you can get much more insight into the impact, and how far Khulisa has been able to help their communities through their webpage, which is Khulisa with K and H, KHULISA.org.za. We're going to make it available on the description of this episode, but go check there, and you can learn their stories and get in touch. And talking about getting in touch, Leslie, what are the best ways that people listening to us right now can help you guys keep going?
Read the data. See what is needed in our country, and look and make informed decisions about where best any type of investment can be spent, where there's going to be return on investment, because it's a need that's been identified. Just giving money for the sake of it doesn't work. We want to invest in needs-driven interventions and I can guarantee any single donor who puts, no matter how large amount into Khulisa or how small, we will be able to show you that your money has taken one child out of illiteracy, put them back in school, they've stopped drug addiction, they found purpose. And that's really because we've got interventions that really, really work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie. And I do hope people get the data, get in touch, and help you guys out. I think it's huge, the work that you guys are doing. So thank you for that as well.
And what we're doing can be replicated anywhere in the world. Really, we've got all the data and the evidence, and we love sharing our learning. So it's up there. We can all make it. We can all change the world. Only one other thing is, please start talking to each other more, different nations, different religions, even family members. We can just talk to each other, understand what's going on. We can really make this world very rich with understanding.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So thank you again. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed the episode, remember to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that shows the algorithms that this is an important conversation and more people can learn about the importance of Khulisa Social Solutions. Bye, and I see you in the next episode.